What's going on, guys? I do want to let you know right from the beginning that I'm not home. I'm on the road right now. So in terms of background noise, I'm in kind of an uncontrolled environment. So you may hear something in the background. I'm going to do the best that I can once I get back to the office to get some of that out if it does happen. And plus, I'm going to lay a little bit of music over the video. So hopefully that'll help as well. Anyway, I hope all you guys have been doing fine. And today we're going to discuss the Sony situation with Microsoft in terms of the Activision Microsoft Blizzard deal and how officials in the UK may have put a bit of a scare in some gaming fans, particularly Microsoft fans, who may think that what's going on in the UK right now with the grandstanding with the politicians and all that is actually a big threat to the deal. Well, I'm here to let you know that it's not. But first, I'm going to let you know that what Sony is doing, don't really be angry with them, because what they're doing is actually quite common in business. In fact, if Microsoft was in the same situation, they would be doing the exact same thing. Oh, and by the way, I'm also using, it's an okay mic, but it's an inferior mic to the one that I have at home. But anyway, yep, Sony is only doing what they feel is in their best interest, okay? Because this Activision Blizzard deal is a big deal. It's not as much of a big deal as they're trying to make it seem. They're basically trying to make it seem like, if the deal goes through, it's gonna kill Sony. We're gonna go into the abyss somewhere. No one is gonna know exactly who Sony is, a few years from now. We're going to be completely wiped off the map. Well, that's absolutely ridiculous. Sony is going to probably always be around in gaming. They're going to probably always be one of the top three. Also, this whole thing about how Call of Duty is going to make the PlayStation irrelevant, that's obviously absolutely ridiculous, because Nintendo doesn't have Call of Duty, and Nintendo leads the industry. They lead both Microsoft and Sony. If you think back on what the tobacco industry was trying to do to the e-vaping industry, to the e-cigarette industry, this is basically the same thing. Politicians back then were grandstanding about what a threat to the young people of our society and the world e-cigarettes was, and how it was bad for your health, and how we don't want to make the same mistakes that we made with cigarettes years ago. Well, fast forward today, the tobacco industry now owns the e-cigarette industry. They totally dominate it. The big 2 or 3 or whatever tobacco industry companies that there are, they now dominate e-cigarettes. But back then, they were paying politicians money to campaign against the e-cigarette industry. So what was bad for you back then is now good for you, or at least acceptable. Let's not forget that it wasn't that long ago that we had government officials here in the United States doing the exact same thing that they're doing in the UK right now. Only, I'll admit, to their credit, they didn't embarrass themselves quite as much. They did embarrass themselves a little, but not quite as much. You see, the UK officials, because they probably have this image of gamers being, young college students, people that either are just old enough to vote or not quite old enough to vote but may be able to vote sometime soon. They wanted to grandstand and pander to a group of people that they thought would potentially be able to vote for them in the near future, or can vote for them right now. They thought it would be a good idea to grandstand by using tweets and emojis, something that is highly unusual. Hogue Law, a high-profile and well-experienced business attorney, was on the Double Barrel Gaming Show, and he commented on how unusual it was to see them, acting in this manner, using tweets and emojis. According to him, this was not something that you normally see anywhere in the world.
I even commented, I thought it was childish. They actually use emojis in this announcement.
In the tweets?
Who freaking does that?
The emoji was funny, right? Well, what does it even mean, right? Because it's like the no symbol, but it's before the sentence. It's like,
it's the block symbol. Yeah, the block symbol.
I've never used an emoji before, CMA.
I can't imagine, Rich, that a government-funded agency is going to have someone that's supposed to be taking this thing very seriously using emojis.
They're trying to be hip.
Ridiculous. I guess.
Like a 20-year-old or something? It's like
So, Rich, being that we got...
I'm not a UK lawyer, but their antitrust jurisprudence mirrors ours. And ostensibly, the Competition and Markets Authority is designed to protect competition. And I think the stuff that is in their press release, that is in their Twitter thread, that is in their actual summary of findings, that is the most concerning is exactly as you put it conceptually, that it's very difficult for antitrust regulators to distinguish between man, that competitor is competing hard. And man, that competitor is illegally trying to monopolize the market. So the analogy I used when I was doing my stream was essentially, you've got a soccer pitch, right? Because we're talking about Europe. We're talking about the UK right now. And what we want to do is we want to have both teams be firing the football towards each other's goals. And when one scores, the other team is harmed. They're down. That's how competition is supposed to work. And what we're worried about is that one team takes out a billy club and knocks out the 3 forwards on the other team. We don't like that. That's not cool. That doesn't get us a good football match. Nobody's happy. But at least as described in their report, yes, there's a lot of stuff that's like, this could make the Xbox more attractive and lower Sony's market share. And I believe my commentary was, and I said this with respect to the Brazil comments, that's not supposed to be necessarily a bad thing. Right. That's supposed to be something that we're in favor of, that you say, oh, okay, you're taking market share from Sony. Maybe Sony has to figure out how to make their thing even cooler. I thought every regulator on earth was going to go to whatever their equivalent to phase 2 was, because it's $70 billion. It's the biggest deal by a magnitude in video gaming history. It just makes sense. You have all the cover in the world to say, hey, this could do something. We should use our higher level review, whatever is in our statute. So none of this surprises me. People ask me this question all morning. I don't believe that there's a material change in the chances of the deal going through.
But political grandstanding has been around as long as politics. But of course, we're not going to turn this video into the History Channel, so we'll use some more modern examples of how politicians don't pass on an opportunity to grandstand. In 2008, the big three, I think it's the three major companies in the auto industry, they showed up in Washington to beg for bailout money. Well, when they showed up in Washington, they all showed up in private jets. All 3 companies, I think it was 3 of them, flew to Washington to beg for welfare in private jets. Well, lawmakers here in the U.S., you think they were going to skip out an opportunity to act like they were outraged by it?
But their urgent cry for help was undercut by news of corporate excess. ABC News reported the big 3 CEOs flew to Washington to ask for taxpayer money on costly company jets.
It's almost like seeing a guy show up at the soup kitchen in high hat and tuxedo.
I'm going to ask the 3 executives here to raise their hand if they flew here commercial. Let the record show no hands went up. Second, going to ask you to raise your hand if you're planning to sell your jet in place now and fly back commercial. Let the record show no hands went up.
The truth of the matter is, they weren't surprised by it at all. They pretty much probably expected for them to fly in private jets. If they would have found out they came any other way, they probably would have been surprised. No one believed that these executives would drive or take a bus or fly coach to come and beg for money. It was pretty much expected that they were going to come in private jets. That's how they always travel. But these politicians decided that they would get FaceTime being outraged and surprised that these people were showing up in private jets. But in the end, the executives got what they came for, a bailout via taxpayers' dollars. For the politicians, this was just an opportunity to show off in front of their constituents. It wasn't that long ago that a young congresswoman totally obliterated a pharmaceutical executive for the high cost of an HIV drug in comparison to what it costs in other countries. I mean, she really ripped him a new one. Even I, who knew that she was full of it, I looked at it because I was entertained by it. She really did a great job. I mean, she really ripped this guy a new one. But here's the problem. That sounds noble, but the thing is, she knows the reason why that company is able to charge what they charge in the US and why they can't charge that in other countries. She knows that in those other countries, the people there demand that their leadership, that their representatives and their government do their jobs and regulate drug prices. They know that. Here in the United States, they don't do that. So in other words, yeah, she's doing a good job ripping him a new one, but the only purpose it serves is to make her look good, because it wasn't talking to him like that wasn't going to change a thing. She needed to out her colleagues, who have the power to make laws and who have the power to campaign for regulation of drug products, drug prices. She knows this, but instead she decides to take the opportunity to make herself look good in front of the public on national television. But all the while she knew that basically that was the only purpose it was going to serve. It wasn't going to serve any other purpose. Even in more serious circumstances, when these companies commit crimes against the public, these government agencies are more about doing just enough to impress the public rather than actually doing their jobs. Somewhere around the year 2020, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau here in the United States proudly reported to global news networks around the world that in their efforts to fight for the people, they were able to get Wells Fargo to agree to a $185 million fine for pressuring their employees to open unauthorized bank accounts in customers' names. They also paid the Department of Justice $3 billion, a $3 billion fine to keep people from going to prison. Imagine if you could do that, just pay a fine when you commit fraud against the public to not go to prison. Who wouldn't take that deal? Well, of course, the DOJ officials took that opportunity to give a press conference where they slathered the public in all sorts of verbiage about how they were bringing justice for the people.
We are hopeful that this $3 billion penalty, along with the personnel and structural changes at Wells Fargo, will ensure that such conduct will not reoccur and that Wells Fargo has turned a corner. But if not, we will be watching and remain ready to take additional action if necessary.
While $3 billion is definitely a lot of money, especially to most of us, here's the problem. To Wells Fargo, that's peanuts. You see, when you look back for the past 14 years, or if you look at the chart here, which goes back 13 years, Wells Fargo made on average around $80 to $90 billion a year, which makes $3 billion for committing fraud against people, getting your employees, first of all, breaking the law by pressuring your employees. Third of all, by pressuring them to break the law to open unauthorized accounts in customers' names. $3 billion to keep somebody from going to prison for that. Well, yeah, that's a great deal, especially if you made $80 to $90 billion over the last 14 years, which is supposed to be the span of time that they were committing the fraud. Imagine if you were running some sort of illegal operation, and then you ran that illegal operation for 14 years. And over 14 years, you made, let's say, $5 million. And then you got caught, you went to court, and when you got to court, the only thing they charged you was a $200,000 fine. You probably would have a party as soon as you left the courtroom. Well, the courthouse, you don't want to have, you don't want to start partying in the lobby area of the courthouse, but you know what I'm saying. I mean, this essentially is what that was. And these DOJ officials, they knew this. This was all just a front, just to be able to get in front of the public and say, hey, look what we did. All of these top officials, both elected and non-elected, even if they're just appointed, they're all careerists. Because modern day conglomerates, their money and their power now spread all over the world. Public officials all over the world are now actors in some international stage show. They're all the same. All of these governments are now connected by global organizations such as the UN, WHO, the IMF, et cetera, et cetera. They now look at the world through a more global lens. There are no borders. Borders are for common people. Borders are for you and me, not for them. So they're all the same. They all get bribed by the same conglomerates, by the same oligarchs. So they're all the same. They all act the same. Their agenda is all the same. Their BS is all the same. But I want to end by bringing it back to Sony. Again, Sony is not doing anything that any other company would not do to survive. I think we all know that. Now, this COD deal is a big deal. I don't think it's as big of a deal as Sony is making it out to be. Of course, they're exaggerating because, like I said, Nintendo doesn't have Call of Duty. And if they do, not that I know of, if they do, it's through cloud, which means it sucks and nobody's playing it. So the idea that, yeah, they may have to do some things differently, but the idea that a company like Sony couldn't survive is ridiculous. In fact, one of the biggest mistakes Sony made was with the Vita, and that is that they did not market the Vita the way that they should have. They could have been probably right there with the Switch in terms of handheld. You know, one of the problems that I had with the Vita was the size. I always thought that really, I know people are into smaller things, but I always thought that maybe it should have been a little bit bigger. And I just think they made a big mistake. They made some missteps, and that's fine. But one of the biggest mistakes that they made with the Vita was to just get rid of it. What they should have did was they should have just re-strategized, and they should have marketed it more. Most gamers didn't even know the Vita exists. Most gamers are casual. And most casual gamers didn't even know. I would take my Vita to work, and there would be people who had Sony PlayStations and Xboxes, and they would look at the Vita like, man, what is that? They didn't even know what it was. So Sony's full of it. They'll survive. And, you know, COD will probably, there's no way Microsoft is going to pass up on the money that they can make on these different platforms. Now, what they're going to do, they're not fools. They're going to use COD, of course, in some way to attract people to Game Pass. Maybe the DLC, it'll come to Sony, but maybe it'll come to Xbox first. Maybe it'll come to Game Pass first. It'll be, you know, little things like that. They are going to use it in some way, but other platforms will probably always have access to COD. That's just too much money not to make, man. And if you expect for them to make it exclusive to Xbox, I think, you know, and with all due respect, I think you're being unreasonable. There's just no way they're going to do that. Now, I can easily see by the holiday of 2023, them combining COD and with the Series S and even making a box with COD on the box. And then you get 3 months of Game Pass for free. I see them doing things like, and these are the things that Sony, rightfully so, is concerned about. COD is an advantage. It is an advantage. They are right about that. But they're exaggerating when they're saying that they don't have what it takes to more than survive. They just need to get up off their asses and compete and come up with some new strategies. And yeah, I believe that if anybody could make a competitor for Call of Duty, it would be Sony. So that's ridiculous. All it would take is some money to put into the media. Let's be honest, they basically own the media. You know, they've got some media officials in their pockets. So I think anybody that's denying that, you're being unrealistic. But Sony will be okay. But anyway, guys, we're going to go ahead and cut this short right here. Look, if you like the video, please give it a like, man. Give it a like and give it you know, subscribe to the channel. And to most of my subscribers, I want to ask you to go ahead and take some time to go ahead and hit that like button for me. And if you didn't like the video, give it a thumbs down because, hey, let's be honest, YouTube doesn't know the difference. Anyway, guys, as usual, stay safe.